Welcome back to Mirror's Signal podcast. I'm your host, Josh Holleran, and today we are joined by Jess Eland, who is a driving instructor and also has a degree in forensic psychology. In today's episode, Jess shares her qualifying journey from part 1 through to part 3, and then we talk about some of the transferable skills she picked up while studying forensic psychology and how that has helped her with her students. We also talk about some tips that can help us during our driving lessons and how to get the best out of our students. If you're enjoying the episode, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button. You can also give the episode a like and share any thoughts that you've got in the comments. The episodes are being uploaded onto Spotify also, so you have some of the older episodes are now available on there, with the rest being uploaded shortly. I hope you all enjoy this episode. Jess, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And thanks for joining me tonight to have a chat.
No, thank you for having me.
That's all right. So we'll get straight into it because you've been in ADI for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I'd like to initially talk about why you became a driving instructor and then a
hmm
bit of the training process that you went through, and then the qualifications that you've got that I think are going to be interesting to discuss. We're going to
Yeah.
talk about some psychology. But before we get into that, what brought you to this industry?
Um, I kind of just fell into it, to be honest. I was away at university, and I came obviously coming home for the holidays and things like that. And at the time, my partner's mum was learning to drive. And I took her out a couple of times in the car because obviously I was over 21 and I'd been driving for more than 3 years. So I took her out in the car a couple of times, and she told me that she thought I'd missed my calling. And that was pretty much it. I just looked into it at that point, and then the rest is history, really.
So with your university, had you finish what you needed to there, or was it a big jump to become a driving instructor? Because that seems like quite a quick transition, I guess.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I graduated in 2020, and obviously it was the height of COVID. I graduated in May 2020, so everything was shut down. So I moved back home, and I was like, God, I need a job. And there wasn't really many places taken on because everyone was in lockdown. So I did some work on the COVID testing sites, which was quite handy for me, because it was actually a job that was taken on. So I did that for about a year while I was training to be a driving instructor. So I did my theory and my part 2 while I was at that job. And then I left. I think it was maybe like 2 months before I went on the pink, because I just didn't want to work there anymore, because I was like, I just can't do this anymore. So I left a few months before I went on the pink, which meant could like focus all my time on my training and things like that. But going from uni to this, it wasn't too bad because I had that like almost a grace period of having a different job. So it wasn't 3 years of forensic psychology and then driving instructor. It was 3 years of forensic psychology, COVID testing, and then driving instructor. So it was a little bit of a grace period between the two, thankfully. I don't know how I would have found it if I went straight from uni to.
How did you find the training to become a driving instructor?
I actually really enjoyed it, to be honest, because when I first started, I was 23. And I passed my actual driving test at 17. So there was still like 6 years there where I could have picked up bad habits and stuff. Um, but I really enjoyed like my training. So getting me ready for my part 2 and things like that, I really enjoyed, because it was nice to know that there was things that I wasn't doing wrong. Like, because obviously the second you pass, you think, oh God, I'm just going to do this myself and stuff like that. Like figuring out little ways, like your own way, really. So it was nice to know that my own way was still the correct way, which was a little bit of a confidence boost. And then there were some things that had to be changed, and I could not parallel park at all. Once I passed my driving test at 17 years old, I don't think I ever parallel parked again. I hated it. And now, once I trained to become a driving instructor, it's literally my favourite thing to do. I love parallel parking because it's so easy. And I don't know why I couldn't wrap my head around it. I think it was because there was reference points, but that's a story for time. And doing the theory as well, it was quite interesting because when I was 17, I passed my theory 4 days after I turned 17. And I didn't really revise or anything like that for it. I was like, do you know what? Let's just go for it. If we fail, we fail. If we pass, we pass. Like, we're all good kind of thing. And I'd had a moped for a year before it as well, because I lived right out in the sticks. So I had like a little bit of road knowledge. And I was like, do you know what? Let's just go for it, see what happens. And I passed, thankfully. Only just, I got 43, which is the pass mark. So it was very close to not passing. But then doing it for the driving instructor one, obviously it's a lot more intense, isn't it? There's more questions and everything like that. So it was interesting to see how many holes I had in my knowledge, really, with the driving instructor one, because when I did it at 17, I was just like, yeah, it's fine. Like, we don't even need to look at the highway code kind of thing. And then to do it to be a driving instructor, I was like, I need to know this. Like, this is scary, especially with it being so expensive as well for a theory test for driving instructors. I was quite shocked at the price difference, really. Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one.
So did you get on all right with your part one then?
I actually failed my first one, and I was really annoyed because you've got to get 80 out of 100, haven't you? And then you've got to get 20 out of 25 on each section, is it? Or
It's
something.
85, I think, off the top of my head, 85 out of 100, but you've got to score a minimum of 20 in each band.
Yes. So on my first one, I got 85 out of 100, but I got 19 on one of the sections. So I was distraught because they don't do it in Carlisle either, which is where I'm from. I had to travel to do it. So my first one, I went to Kendal for it, which is like an hour away. So I was absolutely gutted that I failed the first one, and I was like, right, I'm not doing it anymore. This is it, kind of thing. Like, proper took a little paddy. And then I came home and obviously like revised. My worst one was road signs. That was the one I failed on. And I'm pretty sure that was the one I was terrible at when I was 17 as well. So I just revised like mainly that one, like that section. And then when I went for the second one, I passed it, thankfully. But I had to do that one in Blackpool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I had to travel for them, and I had to travel for both my part twos as well.
How did you get on with your part twos?
I failed my first one with a parallel park, believe it or not. So my first one, I had to travel to Preston for it, because once again, they don't do them in Carlisle. So drove down to Preston, which I thought would work in my favour because that's where I went to university. And I thought, oh, I know some of the roads, like I might be okay here. And I actually think it messed me up more because she would take me down a road and I'd be like, I have no idea where I am. And then we'd come out onto another road and I'd be like, oh, I know exactly where I am now. So I think I was thinking more of where am I than my actual driving part. And then I hit the curb in a parallel park anyways, so it didn't really matter. So I failed the first one, and it was really strange, like failing and then being able to drive from Preston back to Carlisle, because it's like an hour and a half drive. I was like, I've just failed my driving test. How am I allowed to drive? Like, really strange. And then my second one, I passed, thankfully. I did that in Elswick, which is like over in the northeast. And I'd never been there before. I'd never even heard of it before, which I think helped because I was like, right, we just got to focus on the road and focus on like what we're doing kind of thing. So it helped a little bit, I think. But yeah, passed that one. And I think I nearly screamed the examiner's ear off, to be honest, because I was so happy.
I had similar with my part two. I passed first time, but I went somewhere completely unfamiliar. Went
Hmm.
up the day before, went to the test center and kind of scoped out the first 5 to 10 minutes from a test center.
Yeah.
Um, I feel really bad. My memory, which is something we might be discussing shortly, is I'm useless with dates and with areas of places. I
Hmm.
can't remember where my part two was, and I'm not sure if you said
No
the
way.
place, I would know where it is. It was about an hour from my mum's, so I stayed at my mum's the night before. I can't
Uh-huh.
remember where it was though, and I got a car from a driving instructor locally because I didn't want to take it in my own car, so I picked that up about an hour before. Um, but I found I was so focused because it was a new car in an area that I didn't know. I'm like, we got this. I've got to be on the ball. And
Yeah.
I think I probably did better because I had to be on it,
Yeah.
opposed to being somewhere familiar. But I don't
Hmm.
know. I managed to pass it somehow.
That's
Um, yeah.
what was your reasoning for getting another car from an instructor then?
Because the car I was driving at the time was an old Jaguar, which was a great car. I wish I still had it, but it didn't like going in first gear and it wouldn't always stay in first gear. And it
Uh,
was sometimes a bit temperamental going into reverse. So it had character, um, but I didn't think it was the most suitable for a part two test.
Probably not ideal. If you'd have asked them, they'd have said, "Yeah, I'll do a test in a Jaguar." But then if you said, "Be like, maybe not."
Yeah, I mean, I'd have got round. Whether they'd have been happy in the car or not is another matter.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that was I missed that car. Do you know when you just have one and you're like, if I could
Hmm.
get that back, I would. I sold it to my uncle for next to nothing and it flew through its MOT. I don't know how. But yeah. So that was why I took an instructor's car that I'd never driven before.
That makes sense. Makes sense. I get that.
Unfortunately, it worked. But your part three, how did you get on with that?
I was absolutely terrified before it. I'd had, I think I was on the phone to my trainer the night before at like 8:30 at night, being like, "Ian, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm going to be sick. Like, I can't, I'm not going to turn up," everything. I was absolutely terrified because I'd been on the pink license. Obviously, I'd already been teaching for a little bit. And I was like, I actually really love this job. Like, I really love doing this and everything. And I was like, if I fail, like it's gonna crush me, and I don't want, like, I'm not gonna want to do it again. Obviously, I know you've got 3 tries, but I was like, I'm just not gonna want to do it again. Like, no. So I was on the phone to my trainer, and I'd been driving around like where I was gonna do my part three, like the route that I'd planned, everything like that. The week before, I'd driven it at the same time that my part three was gonna be, so I knew what the traffic was gonna be like and everything. Because I'm sure the road. I think my test was on a Monday, and the road that I was going to use had bin day on a Monday. So I needed to go at that time to see how like close the bin men were to it, because I needed to know if it was going to be like a big like distraction or a big obstruction. Like, are we going to end up being stopped for ages? And then I didn't want the examiner to be like, "Well, you could have planned that better," things like that. So I'd done some preparation beforehand. And then when it actually came to the test, I absolutely just winged it. It was ridiculous. Like, I'd planned all of this stuff out. I'd wrote, like, literally wrote everything down to a T. Like, I'd tried to predict what my student was going to say in answers to my questions and things like that, which is such a silly thing to do. So I was like planning everything, because I was like, if this doesn't work, I'm going to cry. So I picked my student up, and she was like quite far into it, to be honest. And I'd previously, one of the other instructors in Carlisle had done a mock test for me on this student, so that I knew what she needed to work on, which was quite helpful. And we needed to work on one-way streets, and that was because I hadn't actually covered them with her yet. So we went down a one-way street, and obviously she was turning right at the end of the road, and she stayed on the left-hand side. And I was sat in the back, and I was like, "Oh no, I haven't taught these." So I was gonna do one-way streets, and then I was like, no, because it takes like, what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes kind of thing. Like, it's not, once you understand the concept of it and you can recognize a one-way street, it's not that difficult. So we then changed it to awareness and planning, to like be aware that there's a one-way street coming up and plan accordingly and things like that. And the examiner obviously came out and called my name, and at this point I thought I was going to be sick. Like, I don't think I've ever shaked so much in my entire life. And then I only had a 3-door car at the time as well, which was really awkward because the examiner had to try and climb in the back of this car, and I was like, I'm really sorry. So once he was in and stuff and we set off, I actually completely forgot that the examiner was there, which was really quite nice. He was really quiet, like barely, I don't even think he coughed at all or anything. I didn't hear him at all, and he'd sat, like, so he was like quite like hidden in the corner, so even when I looked in my mirror I couldn't see him, which was quite nice as well, or I could only just faintly see the side of his head. So that actually really helped, because it just turned into like a normal lesson then, rather than my part 3. And the student that I was doing it with, I had like a really good like rapport with her and everything, and she was grand. She was a good driver. She was really nice. We got on really well. And I'd kind of said beforehand, like, this is important for me. Like, the rest of your lessons will be free if I pass, or help me out, kind of thing. And then she just said all the right things, which I was really happy at. Like, with doing awareness and planning, we were approaching a school sign that had the orange flashing lights, but it didn't have the 20-mile-an-hour sign thing on it, you know, when the lights flash. So as we were approaching it, I was like, right, what do them orange lights mean, kind of thing. She was like, oh, does it mean there's a hazard ahead? And I was like, yes. I was like, it does. And it was, I was like, I could not have like planned that better if I'd have told you to say it, kind of thing. So I was like, get in. And then we got back to the test centre and I'd passed, and I was like, whoo. So that was a terrifying moment, but yeah, I passed first time with that. And apparently in Carlisle it's kind of difficult to pass first time your part 3, depending on which examiner you get. There's one that there's not many people like, but I won't say the name in case they watch this. But yeah, so I got that one that not many people like, and he was absolutely fine with me. I was dead happy with it because obviously I passed first time, and he was just nice and silent, which was nice. But I've not had a standards check yet, so I'm dreading that.
I think it might be a while before you get a standards check. I've not had one, and
Oh,
I'm coming up to 4 years, 3 years.
right.
3 years, I think. I told you I'm useless with dates and I'm useless with areas. I check my badge occasionally, and if it's close to running out, I'll get it updated. But until then, I don't know. I think it's just over 3 years, and I've not had a standards check, and
Yeah.
it seems like they're not coming anytime soon. But that's your qualifying journey.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what you're doing at university, forensic psychology.
Yeah.
What's that?
So it's actually not what I thought it was, to be honest. But it's like the psychology of crime. And to be honest, it was mainly just a lot of straight psychology. So that's what we call like just normal psychology, straight psychology. So it was mainly just that. And then there was like a couple of modules like sprinkled in that were forensic psychology. And then the final year I did my dissertation, which was like forensic psychology based kind of thing. So it was, I'll be honest, I don't actually know what forensic psychology is that much. Which probably isn't that great. It is different to what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like profiling and things like that, which is what I wanted to do. But it turns out that's investigative psychology. And usually what you do when you like qualify as forensic psychologist is you will do risk assessments on prisoners. So like people who are like up to be released, things like that, you will go and do a risk assessment on them, see how likely they are to reoffend, see like how much of a danger they are to society, things like that. And then it's all on you basically if they reoffend. So it's a little bit scary. I think that was probably one of the reasons why I was like, I can't have that much responsibility. But then I became a driving instructor, which is probably about the same amount of responsibility, if not more. So yeah, that's kind of what it is in a roundabout way.
How has the psychology then, the straight psychology, I'm sure we're all interested in that. The forensic side, great, dealing with prisoners.
Yeah.
We're on the other end of the risk spectrum. So we'll go with the straight psychology.
Yeah.
What are some of the things from that have helped you with either the driving instructing or different types of learners? Like, is there a crossover, and what is that crossover?
There definitely is a crossover. It definitely helped. I found it has helped because I did psychology in at A level as well, and then I did some when I went to college before I went to uni. So I've kind of done a lot of psychology it was about 6 years in total, to be honest. That like it was kind of sprinkled into my life, and then the last 3 years it was all psychology. So it's definitely helped because they've like taught me about like a lot of learning difficulties and things like that. So I tend to get a lot of neurodivergent students, so like ones with autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and ADHD. I get a lot of them, which I absolutely love because they always end up teaching me something, which is great. Teaching me a different way to do something, and it's just things to add in to my toolbox, really. Like, you know, if someone can't do something the way that I might do it, I think, oh well, this student tried it this way, why don't you give it a try? And then if it works, it works. If not, then we keep on thinking of different ways. So that helped. And then I got diagnosed with ADHD, so it kind of helped me understand myself a bit better as well. And being diagnosed with ADHD has also helped me with my students as well, because it's made me like think there's a reason that I don't shut up and there is a reason that my brain goes a million miles an hour. But it's also helped me with students who have ADHD or anything like that. Like, I'm able to understand them a little bit better. And because my brain never stops, it means I've got 5 million ways to do one thing. So it definitely helps with instructing because there's always a different way to do it. So it definitely helped with that as well. And then understanding like the brain and the memory side of everything has helped me out as well. Like understanding muscle memory and procedural memory, things like that. It's definitely helped a lot.
Muscle memory is something that comes up quite a bit with driving. I await to be corrected, but I do think you corrected me when we had a phone call a while ago about driving, and I mentioned about things being muscle memory, and you said, well, they're more procedural memory.
Yes.
What's the difference, and what would be muscle memory and what would be procedural memory? And then more so I can understand it, so we can understand it potentially to then help our learners with the skills that they need to acquire to drive.
Yeah. So muscle memory and procedural memory, there isn't actually a difference really. Muscle memory is more like the layman term for procedural memory. So it's basically, it's a part of the long-term memory, and in the long-term memory you have an infinite number of things that you can remember. And I know you probably don't think so with the dates and times and things like that, but you do. And then it can be stored for forever really. You just got to find a way to recall it. So procedural memory, you have to do something over and over again to make sure that the synapses in your brain are formed. So basically you've got like little neurons in your brains, and they have essentially bridges to each other. They're called synapses. And when you do something new, these synapses form, and you want to strengthen them by doing something over and over again, which is why, like, when you first start a car, we don't just tell you to drive and then that's it forever. Like, we explain something, then we'll maybe talk you through it, then we'll talk you through it probably a couple of times, and then you're able to get it by yourself, kind of thing. And there might still be times where you mess it up, but it's just because them synapses in your brain aren't fully formed yet. But they're getting there, basically. It's a reason why if you've ever had a student who's like, oh, I had lessons 10 years ago, but I never got anywhere, and you think, well, you'll remember more than you're expecting to, and they go, I doubt it, because I've literally never sat in a car since, kind of thing. And then they get in and they can drive perfectly, and you're like, there we go, you're fine. So it's because their synapses are already formed. We're essentially just dusting off the cobwebs of them. Is pretty much how I explain it sometimes to people. So it's just about making sure that the synapses are still formed and making sure that they're all connected and everything's in the right way it should be. And then just like refreshing the memory, seeing if there's anything that needs fixed with it, stuff like that. Oh, that's why when it clicks, like it clicks because basically the synapse is formed at that point. And you don't have to think about it. It becomes like a subconscious thing. So how when you're teaching someone, they'll get in one week and they'll be absolutely awful. And then they'll get in the next week and you're like, what the hell is going on here? And it's because the synapse is now fully formed and they're like, their brain's understanding what they need to do.
I had that exact moment today. I always see it must be a massive coincidence because whenever I'm filming, I'm like, that happened today. But we was driving and a young girl, we was working on clutch control and setting off. And I could see that she was stressed and tense. So we went on a road where there's lots of stopping, lots of starting. And I can't remember exactly what we done, but she felt the bite point, held the bite point, got the car going. And she literally said, the penny's dropped with what I need to be doing with the clutch.
Yeah.
And I don't know, with the situation, setting off, stopping, controlling the clutch, and her saying that, is that kind of those connections now setting?
Like, yes, yeah, it's maybe at the moment it's only like a little piece of string kind of thing. Like the synapse is like a little piece of string joining them together, and then the more that she does it, the more it reinforces it, the more it might turn into like a big rope kind of thing between the two. And then at that point, it just becomes completely subconscious. So when we get in the car, that's why training to be a driving instructor is so hard sometimes, because you have to actually think about what you do, which is difficult because if you passed so many years ago, you've not thought about what you have to do in however many years. So it can be quite hard. So when we start to train to be a driving instructor, we have to like essentially dust the cobwebs off them synapses ourselves to then almost reignite them to be like, right, what do I do here? What's my next thing to do? Kind of thing. And that's why commentary driving is really good for that, because it makes your brain think about it. It's no longer a subconscious thing. It's now a conscious thing because you're actually talking about it.
Is that where we get the like conscious competence, unconscious competence, when we work through kind of that scale, and then you're doing things and not really having to think about them anymore?
Yes, because the subconscious competence is the last one, isn't it? So that's when you can do everything yourself. So yeah, it's basically them. So they are rooted in psychology. There is actually science behind them long words that I have not thought about since I trained.
Well, it leads me to another question with these synapses. I'm probably just call them connections because that's a big word for me. But does that work the other way? Because we see a lot of posts on social media. My students great at setting off, changing gear, checking mirrors, so on. But when we come to roundabouts, they're stalling, they're missing mirrors, they're going into the wrong gear. Is that because they've not formed strong synapses yet? And we're adding too many things in and they're almost being overloaded a little?
So I think it's more a case of the synapses are formed. So if you ask them to do it, they'd be able to do it. If the roundabout was empty, they'd more than likely be able to do it. But it's the fact of adding in that like almost element of danger, because when you're on a roundabout, people are coming from your right hand side. So, you know, if you pull out, you might get hit, things like that. So I think it's because they're adding in like that stress, it makes it a little bit more difficult. There was let me see if my brain remembers this. There was a study done. It was on, I think it was on cockroaches actually, in a maze, and they had to find the exit. And if there was like no stress or anything like that, they found the exit pretty quickly. But when you added in some kind of stress factor, they couldn't find the exit. They were just like running into walls and things like that because they were so like panicky. I'm sure it's called arousal theory, I think, but I can't remember. So like the heightened level of arousal, and it's not like a sexual arousal. It's like your brain is going a million miles an hour, a type of arousal kind of thing, that when your brain is really aroused, it finds it difficult to do like simple tasks. So in relation to your question, adding in all them other cars and having to do everything at like potentially faster speeds. Like, I don't know about where you're from, but in Carlisle, the only big roundabouts we have are on the bypass, which is obviously 60-mile-an-hour roads. So you go from being on 30-mile-an-hour roads doing like traffic lights and things like that to, right, okay, so today we're doing roundabouts at 60-mile-an-hour. And they go, huh? And you can see like just all the colour drain from them because they think, oh my God, how is this possible? So it's just adding in all them other little stress factors. So you've got the speed, obviously all the other cars, remembering everything, even though like we talk them through it the first, good couple of times, they still in their brain, they have to remember what they're doing with their body. So it's just adding in all them little stress factors can definitely make it so that although the synapses are formed and they're good and they're strong connections, it's just at that moment your brain goes, nah, too many things here, we're about to die, I can't remember that synapse is gone, it's at the back now, kind of thing. So it's kind of just throwing everything in all at once, and the brain just goes, no thank you. Really.
So how can we help our students go from forming those synapses with, say, setting off and controlling the car to doing it when there is dangers around? Is there kind of psychology in there somewhere that might help us understand what the student might be going through so we can then help them progress through it?
More to like the driving instructor training. So the whole like talking you through it, things like that. And then obviously us taking responsibility for danger. We've got the pedals so we can stop the car if they have like a little bit of a meltdown, the brain just forgets everything. We have that ability to keep the car safe. So I think that links more to the driving instructor training part of it rather than the psychology part, because we are able to, stop the car, set it off, although we can't accelerate, which sometimes annoys me a little bit, because there's some that you like, just pick up the speed, just press your right foot down a little bit. So it would help sometimes if we had an accelerator, I think. But because we're able to do that, like set off with the bite, brake for them, we can reach across, put the indicator on, we can grab the wheel, we can check the mirrors if need be, stuff like that. So we're able to take away some of them elements of danger if need be. A lot of the times I find with my students, we'll do like full talk throughs, and then like once they're kind of getting the hang of it, they'll usually do mirrors, indicate, and the lanes, and then I'll do like what gear we need to go into and if we can go, because then they're doing things that they've already done before, although they were able to pull out of a junction, decide when it's safe, things like that. It's a little bit scarier because it's faster roads, and it's, for some reason, the fact that it's a circle kind of messes people up as well rather than being a straight road. So they're able to focus on the things that they know they can do because they're having to do it in everyday life, like everyday driving anyways. And then once they can wrap their head around that and that synapse is formed of, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing for this exit if I was going off at this one, that's when we can start to add in, the extra little elements of danger of, okay, you decide what gear to go into, you decide if it's safe for us to go, things like that. So I think that definitely links back to the driving instructor part rather than like an actual psychological thing to do. Really.
It sounds like, yeah, breaking it down and sharing those tasks. So it's not, right, you're really good at checking your mirrors, setting off in this really nice quiet area. Here's a 60-mile-an-hour road with a roundabout on the end. Good luck.
Yes, yeah. It definitely helps being able to split it down and us take some of that responsibility off them, because it makes it less scary as well for them if they know that we're there and we're going to talk them through it and things like that. It definitely helps.
What other parts of the driving can this memory affect? And how can we affect it or help our learners with it as part of driving?
A lot of the times when you tell someone to do something and they try and talk you through it, they can't. Usually it's like at that point where you know that they can do it and they know they can do it. But if you say, right, talk me through it, and they can't, usually that's like quite a good indicator that it's moved to the correct part of memory. So it's now in the procedural memory part, because it is a subconscious thing. You struggle to recall it. So when you say to them, okay, so talk me through setting off then, and they go, I don't know. And then they like question, can I actually drive? It's at that point where you're like, cool, you've got this, because you have no idea what you're doing, basically. Like you just do it. So it kind of helps at that point. You're like, okay, yeah, this person now understands all of this because they can no longer talk me through it, kind of thing. So definitely just always referring back to the student as like, do you get this? Like, do you want to talk me through it? Things like that. It definitely helps, and it moves it from their short-term memory into the long-term memory, which is like procedural memory is a part of that. So the more that they talk through it, the more likely it is to go from short-term memory to long-term memory, which it then forms into procedural memory.
Nice. It's interesting to hear kind of what's going on, because you have an idea, because we see it with our students and we see different students every day and they all process at a different level, but ultimately we know what they need to be able to do. How they get there is kind of their journey, I guess.
Yes.
What are some of the ways that it's helped you with students with additional needs? What can we do, or what are some of the things that might help us without us going getting a degree that takes us 3 years?
My like, if anyone ever asks me anything about like how to teach someone with additional needs, my main thing I always say is ask the student. They deal with themselves every single day. So ask them how they deal with certain things in life. So like if there's something that's maybe stressful, ask them how would they deal, in a stressful situation in real life, kind of thing, like outside of the car. And then for me personally, it's my job to translate that into something that can be used in driving. Because they have like additional needs and things anyways, and not that the brain works differently, but they maybe process things a little differently, or they understand things a little bit differently. It's my job to help them translate their normal life into a driving life, kind of thing. So yeah, the main thing that I always say to everyone is just ask the student. They know themselves better than anyone, so they know how they would deal with a certain situation. And then me being able to say, okay, well, you would do this like in if this happened in normal life kind of thing. So this is what you could potentially do in this situation when you're driving. So it definitely helps to just be open and honest with the student, and having that line of communication where they can be open and honest with you as well is a really important thing. Because a lot of people who have like additional needs or like a learning difficulty or anything like that, they struggle anyways being honest a lot of times, because they feel people might look at them differently or think differently of them and stuff like that. But having that open line of communication to be like, you can say whatever you want to me, like I'm not bothered. My job is to make sure that you're safe when you drive and you're a confident driver and things like that. So like, let's think of the ways in your life that's made you, a safe person when you're crossing the street, a confident person or projecting that confidence when you walk into a room. You might not actually feel confident, but if you project confidence, then that works as well. So it's just figuring out how they can use that in driving, which can sometimes be very interesting.
I've really struggled with that until recently. I'm starting to kind of patch it together, I think, and that's taking something from outside of the driving and linking it to the lessons. Like I've got a student at the minute who does dance, so a lot of what we do is linked to like dance routines and how she's learnt them. Another student learned playing the drums quite young, so I'm trying to figure out how to link that into the lessons. But that's, I think, one of the hardest things I've found is like when the lads getting them, oh, what do you get up to? What do you do in your spare time? Play football. And I'm like, well, how can I link football to what we're doing right now? And I'm getting there because we almost can't do it on a surface level. We've got to do
Yeah.
it at more of a deeper level, haven't we?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I find I sometimes struggle with that because like I don't play football. I don't really know anything about football. So like if someone says, oh, like if I go, right, what's your hobby? So I can link it back to someone. Then if they say football, I'm like, oh, okay. So I like just rack my brain to think about something. I had a woman, she was a lawyer, but it was like a contractual lawyer, I think. And I was like, right, but you still had to do like submitting evidence and everything like that, didn't you? Excuse me. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, right, cool. Because when we were doing parking, she really struggled when she was like coming from reverse and going back into first to set off again to do her observation. She really struggled with that. And I was like, right. I said, when someone submits a new piece of evidence, she was like, yeah. I was like, you have to look at the whole case again, don't you? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, right. So I was going from reverse into first, is it submitted a new piece of evidence, and then looking at the whole case is I was doing full observations. And she was like, okay, yeah. And then it clicked for her. And so I think sometimes it's quite difficult if you know nothing about the thing that like they have as a hobby or a job or anything like that. But I find as well sometimes like just making something completely random really helps as well. Like it could be the most basic knowledge of something like football, for example. The most basic knowledge, a good one that we do is we have an off-site area where we teach 14 to 16-year-olds. And a lot of the times there's like 6 cones in a row. So I'll get them to drive in and out of the cones. And if they like football, I go, okay, so we're essentially going to dribble the car between the tires kind of thing. So it's just really basic knowledge, but it kind of also shows them that we're interested as well, because although we're asking what their hobby is in order to help them, they think, oh, they're actually kind of asking about me. So like, it makes a talking point. And then you might find that you've actually got a hobby in common, and then it makes it an absolute dream when you've got a hobby in common, because you're like, I know everything about this, come on then kind of thing.
I had that. He's a friend. I train with him, so we do the same sport together. And I taught him how to drive a couple of years ago now. I think it was maybe a year ago. But we was because it's the only sport I know, and I know it quite in depth to a certain extent. And that's how we was getting through the driving lessons. I'm like, oh, this is what we're doing. This is why I'm relating it back to the sport. And I think you've hit it there. I don't know an awful lot about anything other than my own interests. If I'm interested in something, I'm all in. But if I'm
Yes.
not interested in something, like zero, no effort goes in that area. So when I
Yeah.
do have different hobbies, I don't know anything about it. So finding that common ground is where I was struggling.
Yeah.
So I found more getting it out of them, cheating again. It's like, so
Hmm.
tell me, how have you learned this? What have you done with this? How did you get good at it? What makes it interesting? And I'm finding that's then helping me link it to driving.
It's interesting that you call that cheating though, because it's not cheating. It's you are delving into your student, finding out what makes them tick. You're finding out the way that they learn things. So it's not cheating at all. It is actually like, I would say that's good instructing, to be honest, because you are learning how they would learn a new skill and you are about to teach them a new skill. So you need to know that. And a lot of people, like, I remember at school, you're always asked, like, are you a visual learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner? Are you an audio learner? And like every time they went through this, I was like, I don't know what learner I am. Like, none of these make sense to me, kind of thing. So I think if you ask your student, oh, are you a visual, are you an audio, or are you a kinesthetic learner, they'll go, I have no idea. So instead, relating it back to something that they know, as in like, how did you learn this? You know, did you practice it? Did someone show you what to do? Did someone tell you what to do? Kind of thing. There's the three different types of learners. I think there's four, but I can never remember the other one. Um, there's, you know, three different ways to learn. And if they say one of them, you go, oh, okay. So that's the way that you learn then. So I wouldn't call that cheating at all. You're finding out information, relevant information.
I find it makes the job so much easier because we're, yes, we're teaching them, but generally they're teaching themselves because it's, oh, how do you learn? How have you broke that down? How are you going to break this down then? This is what we need to achieve. How do you think you can break it down? And oh, I'm going to try this and I might try that. I'm like, cool, you do that. I'll sit here and keep us safe. Let's go. Um, but it has really helped. And I think doing it more is
Mm-hmm.
helping me kind of keep going forward with it because it's like get in the car, let's learn about driving, let's develop driving. But when I spend more time learning about their interests and relating it back to driving, it does make a difference. And we've gone
Yeah.
off on somewhat of a tangent there. There's some psychology in there somewhere, and then there's just
Somewhere.
understanding people and how they learn. I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest challenges generally that I see is school and college tend to be a lot of one size fits all. And when they get in the car, they're expecting that one way. You tell them, they practice it, away you go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll often revisit how they would like to learn things throughout the training. Because
Yeah.
most people get in, I'm like, how do you like to learn? Oh, I like to learn by doing. And I'm like, okay, and we'll try doing things and it's not quite working. So then I'll get the display book out, or I'll get a book out, or I'll draw a picture, or I'll get out of the car and look at it, or I'll talk them through. And it's like, I need to, you've told me one way, but I'm not sure that's the most effective for you. And revisit it and deliver to that individual opposed to what I want to deliver.
Yes. And it might change throughout as well. Like there might be certain things where, you know, they're more of, oh, you just explain it, I'll do it. There might be other ones like recently I've had a string of people who, when we're doing learning reverse way parking, if we're doing the 45-degree angle one, they can't wrap their head around it. So a lot of the times I'll get them to sit in the passenger seat, I'll sit in the driver's seat and I'll do it. And then it clicks with them. They're like, oh, okay, now I get it. But before that, when they like started doing the lessons, I've never had to like actively show them anything. So it can depend on what you're doing as well as the way that you learn it. You know, it might change throughout. So revisiting it is always a really good thing to do. And it makes it more personal as well, really, rather than the, you know, one size fits all that schools kind of force down your throats. It definitely makes it a little bit more personal. And then it helps them to be better drivers as well, because if they've learned their way or they've done it their way and their brains figuring it out and everything, and we're just there to like to make sure that we essentially don't die, and they're just learning their way. It makes them so much better drivers, because then when we're not in the car, once they've passed, they're not thinking, oh God, what am I meant to do in this situation, or how can I deal with this? They can relate it back to other situations that they've been in. Might not be exactly the same, but they're like, right, cool, in this situation I did this, so I'm going to do something similar, or I'm going to do this again, kind of see what happens, sort of thing. It definitely turns them into better drivers if they're finding their own way, rather than us being like, you do this, then you do this, and if you don't do this, you've done it all wrong and you can't drive, kind of thing. Which, yeah, it's kind of the approach that school gives you, really.
It's a shame because it's almost like people aren't allowed to make mistakes and they have to do everything on their own. And it's like, you do it right, you do it on your own, you don't copy anyone, and then you finish school and you're like, wait a minute, I
Yeah.
can I can get an accountant to do my books and I can get someone to manage my social media, and
Yeah.
I've not got to do it all on my own. I mean, most of it I do, but that's a different story. And then in the car, it's the same thing. They don't want to make mistakes, and trying to build that trust where it's like, look, it's okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a mistake, it's a learning opportunity. Let's see why it happened and
Yeah.
how we move forward. And it is nice when you see them kind of settle into that atmosphere opposed
Yeah.
to being terrified about making a mistake.
Yes. Like I had it today. I had first lesson today, and when he was pulling up on the side of the road, he hit the curb, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hit the curb." And I was like, "It's cool. Like, you're not the first. You will not be the last to do it. So don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. You've not popped my tire, so that's fine. If you pop my tire, it might be a different story, because then we've got to end the lesson and we've got to figure out what we're doing from there, because I don't have a spare in my car, because there's no room for one." So, I'm like, it's fine. Don't worry about hitting the curb. People hit the curb all the time. Like, people who pass hit the curb all the time. It's fine. And I think once they kind of realize, like you said, that it's okay to make mistakes, you're allowed to, it definitely calms them down and makes them a bit more comfortable to be like, all right, okay, cool. And then I find as well that when they're comfortable like that, they're happy to like ask questions of what would happen if I did this. 9 times out of 10, I'm like, right, let's do it, see what happens. And a big one that I always find is going around, like when you're turning into a road, turning it in third is a big one that I always find. And they go, what happens if I turn the corner in third? I'm like, right, let's do it then. And obviously, we know as instructors, it's going to be way too fast. No one's going to have fun. It's going to be awful. So they do it. But I'm like, at least if I'm there, I can keep the car safe. If we do go too fast, I can slow us down if we need to. If there's another car coming out of the junction, anything like that, there's ways that I can keep it safe. But once they do it, I'm like, so how was that? And they're like, that was too fast. I'm like, are you going to do it again? No, never, kind of thing. But if we didn't do that, then when they pass, the first time they turn a corner, they might go, I wonder what happens if I turn it in third here, and do it. And then all of a sudden, there's no one else in the car. No one else is there to keep the car safe, and they end up crashing or whatever. And it scares them. But having like that level of comfortability with your instructor is definitely helpful to be like, cool, let's see what happens, sort of thing.
I really try to encourage those types of questions.
Yeah.
And I had one a couple of days ago. We was working on just getting up to speed a bit quicker. And I'd said, we're on a long straight road, loads of traffic lights, but just practice setting off and think about how you want to set off normally, slowly, fast, whatever. Just think about what you want to do
Mm-hmm.
it, and ask yourself, did you achieve what you wanted to? And then we get down the road, and all of a sudden, she puts her foot down. We're not speeding, but we're accelerating quite quick.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just ease off a little bit. Like, we've got some lights coming up, just. And she kind of took a second. She was like, I was just practicing with the accelerator. I'm like, okay, I'll shut up. You carry on practicing, do what
Yeah.
you need to do. And she
Yeah.
was just feeling the car and trying to understand the car. And I'm like, it's nice that they can do that and
Mm-hmm.
kind of say, well, actually, I'm doing what you told me to, so leave
Yeah.
me to it.
Yeah, exactly. It is nice. I had a girl who was the same actually. We were doing the bypass, so 60-mile-an-hour roads and obviously roundabouts and stuff like that. And there's a couple of long stretches on it, and she takes like a little while to get up to speed kind of thing. Like she's just very light on the accelerator. And at the minute, for some reason, my car, if you press the accelerator too hard, it makes like a horrible whiny noise. I just ignore it. It's all good.
Just turn the radio up.
Honestly, it's such a female response. But it actually kind of helps in lessons, to be honest, because when she was doing it, I was like, right, press the accelerator harder. And there's been loads of times where I've said, you know, press it harder, you know, more gas, everything. I've tried everything, and she just didn't do it. And I was like, right, I want you to make the car scream at us. And she was like, what? And I was like, press the accelerator and press it hard. And then obviously this whine comes in, and I'm like, that noise is the one I want to hear. And she was like, okay. And then she did it a couple of times, and now she's absolutely fine doing it. So it does help to, like, especially being able to relate back, and especially if your car's making a weird noise and you can use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that's good advice or maybe get to a mechanic. Who knows? But if it's working for you, it's working for you.
Fine.
So are there any other things that you picked up through psychology that might be interesting in our line of work that might help us?
So there is one thing, but I didn't learn this in uni or anything like that. I recently went to an autistic like talk night kind of thing, where it was put on by people who have autism, and the main woman had ADHD, I think it was, and they were like running through kind of everything, and it was a talk more for how like you can deal with it if you've got like a close family member, things like that, or like your child's got autism and stuff. But me and my boss went, and it was actually really, really interesting. And there was one major thing that I took away from it, and it was called proprioception, and I'd never heard of this word before. Yeah, it's a very big word. And it's basically, you know, when you're like sat at traffic lights with your student, and they've maybe got the handbrake on, so their right foot is hovering over the accelerator or something, and they just all of a sudden press the accelerator, and it's just like chilling on the accelerator, and the car's revving, and you're sat there like, are you noticing this kind of thing? And you go, just bring your right foot up, like just take your foot off the accelerator, and they go, oh, I didn't even realize it was on there. So that's proprioception. You basically you almost forget you have limbs, which sounds very dramatic, but it's not. It's like you just forget. So like pressing the accelerator while you're stationary, and you don't need to. You just forget that like your right foot is hovering over that accelerator. So if you press down, you're going to press the accelerator kind of thing. So that was something that I found really interesting, was learning about that. And it kind of like, it definitely helped me understand. I think that's another reason why a lot of people keep the hand on the gear stick, because of that proprioception. Like you've changed gear, and then you kind of just focusing on the road, focusing on bringing the clutch up slowly. So this left hand is just chilling on the gear stick, and next thing you know, you like, no, back on the steering wheel, just anywhere but the gear stick kind of thing. So that was a really interesting point for me that I learned.
You've got me thinking about that now. I can see it with the revs and the gear stick, to be fair, just leaving that hand down. And does that link to the cognitive side of it then, the thinking, where, like you've said, we're focused on the road, we're focused on the pedals, we're not thinking about our left arm that's down somewhere on the gear stick. We're thinking about our other three limbs and what they're doing.
Yes, yeah, we're thinking about everything else that's going on. So it definitely does link to the cognitive side of it and stuff. Yeah, it was really interesting, because although I learned about it at this autism talk, it wasn't like, it's not just something for neurodivergence, it's something that everyone does, and you don't realize it until like it's actually highlighted to you. I found it was so interesting. I was like, oh my God, yeah. I was like, I didn't realize there was an actual name for it either. It was very interesting to learn about, but it definitely links back to the cognition side of being like, cool, I've done the thing that I needed to. There's a road in front of me, there's cars coming towards me, everything like that. I need to focus on that. So that's why like the hand gets left on the gear stick, because they're thinking, cool, I now need to watch this road, sort of thing.
I That's opened up lots more questions for you, but I'm not sure we're going to delve down every one of them because I'm thinking of all kinds of examples of when people haven't moved limbs that maybe they should have when we're driving. And I'm like,
Yeah.
is that one of them? Um, but that's interesting that it's just we've forgot that it's there and we're elsewhere.
Yeah. The way to like differentiate between them is if you say like, oh, just like, you know, hand off the gear stick or something. Usually if they go, oh, I didn't even realize, that's proprioception, because they'd forgot about it. If they say like hand on the gear stick, if they go, oh, it's just comfier, well, that's not proprioception, that's just you being lazy. Move your hand kind of thing. But yeah, if they say, oh, I didn't realize, or I didn't even know it was still there, that's usually the proprioception one.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily just laziness and wanting to look cool with the hand on the gear stick. It could
Yeah.
just be proprioception.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and remember that word. That's a good one. That's gonna come out in a driving lesson at some point, and I'll look somewhat intelligent for about
Yeah.
3 seconds.
Until they ask you what it means and you got
Let me watch this podcast a minute
yeah,
and I'll tell you.
definitely.
So it's fascinating and how you've then gone on to link it with the additional needs and helping people down that way is really interesting. I find a lot of my students that I'm getting now are coming kind of from there, from like recommendations, or they've been
Mm-hmm.
trying around, whether that's a lot of autism and ADHD at the moment. And
Yeah.
I think that's because I'm manual and I expect people with kind of dyspraxia and stuff like that may
Mm-hmm.
go to automatic. I'm not sure. But it's that they're the lessons that I enjoy, trying
Mm-hmm.
to understand those people rather than someone that flies through it in 20 hours because they just get it. And I'm like,
Yes.
you could have gone to any driving instructor and you'd have done it in 20 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. They're almost like the boring ones, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not going to admit to it too many times on record, but I do like the ones where I've got to really try to help them. And I learn as much as they learn
Yes.
generally in those types of lessons.
Yeah. And a lot of the times they're teaching us something as well. You know, a different way to do something or a different way to deal with something is another interesting one. Like how they would deal with it in that situation and stuff like that. And like I said, it's all just different tools for us to use. For other students, really.
It's it's a great job and a real eye opener with a lot of students that I'm getting. It's like when I understand what they're thinking, I'm like, wow, okay, now I know why all of this is going on because you're thinking about way too many things. We
Yeah.
need to we need to calm it down and just pick one, just one
Yeah.
thing and focus on that.
Yeah.
So what I would like to do now, if we can, I've got some tell me questions. Do you mind if we go through them?
Yeah. Go for it.
So the first question, can you tell me what car you would drive if it was the only car you could drive forever?
Ooh. I think, oh, there's a couple to be fair. When I was younger, I always wanted a Nissan 370Z
Nice.
because I used to play it on Need for Speed all the time
Yep.
in burnt orange gold colour. That would be one of them. I do love a Volvo.
I mean, that's a bit of a change.
It is a bit, isn't it? Um, I don't know, to be honest. I do like a Ford Raptor as well, the big 4x4s type thing. I like them. So maybe just if I could just get one of each, that would be grand.
So instead of just one car that you've got forever, you're going to choose three: a racing car, a practical car, and a Ford Raptor to take you anywhere. I like
Yeah,
that you've covered all bases.
there we go.
Can you tell me if you could deliver a driving lesson to anyone, who would it be?
Ooh. Do you know, I think I would love to deliver a lesson to Colin McRae, the rally car driver. Unfortunately, he's dead, so that is not possible. But I think it would be very interesting to teach him a lesson.
And then have him teach you a lesson, I expect.
Yes, most definitely.
Nice, a nice answer. Can you tell me the best advice you ever received?
Is that in driving or just in everyday life?
And anything, everyday life.
Oh, ooh, that's a very good question. That's making me think a lot. Do you know what? Actually, I don't know. Recently, I've been like a little bit more like spiritual and into like meditation and things like that. Um, so like the girl who does the meditation that I go to, she's like this just this incredible ethereal being. She's absolutely amazing, to be honest. She's actually like a fairy. It's crazy. Like she just always calls us like divine blessings and things like that. So just I think the best advice is just that I've received is just like leaning into your own power, I guess.
Nice. From not knowing, that got quite deep, didn't it?
It did really, didn't it?
It did. I like it. We'll see where this one can go. Can you tell me your favorite book?
Ooh. So there's like probably two. One that I have actually read, another one that I haven't read yet, but I do have it. It's just a bit. Uh. So the first one I read it when I was quite young, probably about 10 or 11ish. It's called Ways to Live Forever. And I don't know why it's just massively stuck with me. And I think it's like just like about like seizing the day and just doing your thing kind of thing, which I quite like that. I don't tend to read, to be honest. I think that's my issue. And then another one, which is the one that I haven't read yet. I do plan on reading it, but it's a little bit kind of thing. It's called The Gates of Janus. And it was written by Ian Brady.
Okay.
And he like analyzes other serial killers and things like that in it, which I haven't read yet because it's quite thick. I just don't think I've got the mental capacity to read it. But I think when I eventually get around to it, I think that'll be a very interesting read.
So just leaning back to your forensic psychology a little bit.
Yeah, just a bit, getting back in touch.
Nice. Can you tell me one message you would give to someone who's considering becoming a driving instructor?
Ooh, go for it. Yeah. A lot of people say to me, like when I say I'm a driving instructor, they say, "Oh, you must have a lot of patience." I don't. Probably the least patient person you'll ever meet. But when I get in the car, I'm like so patient with learners. It's weird, But if it's something you're thinking about doing, go for it. See what happens, see where it takes you. You might love it, you might not. But there's only one way to find out, isn't there?
There certainly is. Nice answer. Can you tell me one piece of advice you would give a student before they go for their driving test?
Ooh. The one that I always say is drive like you drive. Drive how you drive with me, not how you think the examiner wants you to drive. That's a big one.
Nice. Great answer there. I mentioned something similar, and I tend to feel when people are making mistakes, it's because they're trying to drive for the examiner instead of driving for themselves.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
Definitely.
And the next one, can you tell me something you wish you were better at?
Ooh. I wish I was better at drawing, actually.
Nice.
Because I really enjoy it. And I'm like an absolute child when it comes to the colouring impact. I love it. I'm like this, right close to it, like making sure that I'm not getting out the lines or anything. But I'd like to be able to draw or just be like good at art. I think, yeah, just have some form of artistic outlet. That's good. Like, because I can draw, but you won't know what it is, and it doesn't look like anything at all, and it's not good. But to be actually good at it, I think that's what I would like. Yeah.
Nice. And then the final question, do you have any final messages or anything that you would like to share?
Ooh. I think the main thing that I like to tell other instructors is just ask your student. Each lesson and each student is individual. So one thing that works for someone might not work for someone else. So just make sure you're always relating it back to them and asking, if they understand it. I always say, does that make sense? Or do you get what I mean? Kind of thing all the time. Like after every single sentence I say, it might not even be about driving and I still say it. So I think that is a good thing to do. Just ask the student, relate it back to them, and just make sure that they're happy with it, really.
Nice. Jess, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you this evening and understanding some bits of what's going on in our brains when we're learning something new. But thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's been lovely.
It's been great, really interesting stuff, and a lot to take away from it and hopefully implement in some of my lessons.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.